I think it is really important to pick people that are doing the thing that you think is so great and making sure that you still think it's that great when you really hear the true behind the scenes.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a free resource for women who work in the sports and entertainment industry. Each week we get real and talk about the things that hold us back and how we can overcome them and keep climbing to the top. And the top is however you define it. We talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Consider this podcast your secret weapon. You will learn from the best in the business and be able to take immediate action with all the advice that you hear. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake, a leadership development coach and consultant. I've worked in sports for 20 years. 15 of those years were spent working for the Red Sox, Dodgers, and the Cubs. After 15 years of working in the front office, I took a leap of faith and I started my own business. Friends, as a Black woman in sports, I know that the industry can take a toll on your confidence and sometimes leave you feeling defeated. Join me each week so I can support you on your journey. I promise you, each week you will feel stronger and more confident than the week before. So let's get started with this week's episode. When I started in sports 20 years ago, I never saw female team positions at the major league level. If they existed, they kept them hidden behind closed doors. That kind of tracks, right? And while I'm not an MD, not even close, unless you can count my extensive research on WebMD, I get over the top excited when I see women physicians at the major league level. I'm talking fist pumps in the air. I start clapping and cheering. Just ask my husband. So you can imagine my joy when I got the opportunity to interview Dr. Julie Bruene. Y'all, I had so much fun recording this episode. Within the first 5 minutes of talking to her, before I even hit record, I thought I was talking to like an old college friend. And it's probably why I called her Julie when I welcomed her to the podcast and not Dr. Bruene. Don't cancel me, okay? Dr. Bruene is a sports medicine physician here in Chicago. She's a team physician for, get this, the Chicago White Sox, Chicago Bulls, Depaul University, and Trinity International University. Listen in as we dive into all of the things. Dr. B talks about what she learned about herself and imposter syndrome, the untrue story she made up about how her colleagues viewed her, when she recognized she was self-sabotaging, why people-pleasing can be detrimental to your career, how to avoid ruminating on mistakes that you make, and my personal favorite, why you need to surround yourself with people who will call you on your bullshit. All right, Game of Her Own listeners, let's do this. Julie, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thanks so much, Jahaan.
I can't wait to dive into what you do and the work that you do and being in the sports teams. And there's just so many questions I was thinking about yesterday and this morning. But take us back in time and tell us when you first fell in love with sports.
I'm wondering if my love affair with sports was almost a bit of an act of defiance. So I'm the youngest of 5 kids, mainly girls. And sports wasn't something that we were like dissuaded from as kids, but it certainly wasn't like, oh, this is the path that you go. And then, here's the teams that we'll sign you up for. It was just sort of like, you can do that if you want, but you could also do cheerleading, which is not that it's not a sport, but like things that were more traditionally, I grew up in like the 80s and early 90s of like traditionally like femme presenting things. And I don't know, I think I was just a little defiant kid. And also I was really tall, really fast. So I think that there was a little bit of like nature and nurture going on in there too, that I was slightly recruited towards certain sports. And where I went to grade school and junior high, I went to a parochial Catholic school. And I just happened to be in a cohort of a bunch of young girls who were also like really into sports and pretty athletically inclined. So they were my schoolyard chums. And they were like, hey, do you want to play softball with us? Like, hey, do you want to, check out the basketball team? And I think in the end, I had 2 really close little girlfriends when I was a kid. They were twins, and their dad was our coach for everything. And he was just like the most quiet, kind, but like imposing, but just like one of the best coaches I've ever interacted with. And his name was Jerry Klopp, and he's unbelievable. And he was just the dad that coached everything. And we won everything. And I don't know if it was a nice combination of, the right group of people at the right time, but I really think it was because we all really loved and respected him. And I think he really, like, again, quietly, kindly sort of pushed us to really reach our goals. I mean, I'm talking about like 6th and 7th grade basketball.
But still, that's impactful on your
totally.
Yeah.
Mr. Klopp was awesome and was really fair. And I know it can be kind of tricky when you have your own children, that you're coaching. And he was always very fair with all of us. And I just look back at that time. I think I went into it because I was like, none of my sisters play sports. I'm going to do it, and then it just happened to be this perfect little world where I got to, I don't know, like hone my interpersonal relation skills a little bit and understanding what it means to lose and what it means to show up for other people on a team and control your emotions a little bit. Because I've always been a pretty emotional kid and now adult.
Yep. So same.
It was
same.
Nice. Sometimes it's hard to keep things in the box, but I think it really taught me at a young age to sort of understand what it's regulating your emotions when things don't go your way or when they do. And then you can handle your enthusiasm and your happiness with grace and with dignity to the other team that didn't win. And so I guess it started off as like I'm doing this because no one else is doing it in my family. And then it turned into like, all your friends are doing it. It's great. And it was just such a lovely way to have to navigate through a pretty difficult time in young people's lives, which is like middle school, so that's sort of how it started.
Tell everybody what you do now and who you do it for. And there's a couple of different teams in there. So tell us everything.
The long form title would be a primary care sports medicine physician. So I'm not a surgeon, but I do mainly orthopedic medicine, sports medicine. I work at Midwest Orthopedics at Rush, which is a wildly successful, wonderful, large group of orthopedic physicians here in Chicago. And we take care of a variety of different teams. The teams that and the organizations that I participate the most with would be Depaul University, as well as the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Bulls. I've been involved with those teams for a little less than 10 years since I finished my fellowship, kind of sort of eased into those roles as you kind of build up your ranks in as you do anywhere else. But yeah, so the Bulls, the Sox, and DePaul are my passions. And then on top of that, I mean, my day-to-day job is just seeing patients in the office for a variety of any musculoskeletal complaints, a lot of arthritis management, and then a lot of like people with acute or chronic injuries or something, or that we talk about that stuff. So yeah, but it's been pretty rad, I'll tell you.
Did you always know you wanted to go into that work?
Not really. I looking back at some of the decision tree that I followed throughout my life. I mean, I think a lot of it is being at the right place at the right time and having a general idea of where you might want to go. I applied to college as a pre-journalism major. I thought I wanted to write and I wanted to be involved in journalism, and I always enjoyed writing, and I was in some classes that helped me to cultivate writing. And then that was like into junior year of high school. And then senior year of high school, I took 2 classes. I took a medical chemistry class and an anatomy and physiology class, and that changed everything. I had 2 amazing teachers. It totally changed my perspective. I changed my major when I went to University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I changed my major when I got down there to go into pre-medicine, the pre-med track. And then I did health planning and administration because I just was absolutely fascinated by the human body and movement and how we work as human beings. And it flipped a switch in me. So I decided I wanted to go into medicine. So, throughout undergrad, that was the next goal. Did all my stuff, took all the classes, took all the tests, blah, 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 did all the research, just asking around and learning from other people. That tends to be how I help forge my path. I mean, I think people learn in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's reading different books about it, or back then it was a little bit harder because the internet was sort of more in its infancy, but finding out like what are the right pathways to take and what are the milestones to try to leap over to become competitive for the next thing, right? I think in the end, it's like being somebody who was always a little bit competitive minded, and even going back to my 6th grade basketball days, like it's like, all right, how do you remain competitive? So try to learn those things from other people or people that had done it a year or 2 ahead of me in undergrad. And then getting into medical school, I went to Rush University Medical Center. Rush, I think, is unbelievable. That's where I work through now. I will be a Rush lifer, as it will, because it's just such a wonderful organization. So I did my medical school there, which was unbelievable. I still remember the day that my mom called me because they sent my acceptance letter to my parents' house. And she called me and I was with some girlfriends in college and I was just losing my mind in the car about getting into medical school. And then after that, then I was like, okay, well then now you have to decide what's the next thing you have to be competitive for. And that's choosing what your residency is. And through medical school and kind of having different opportunities to work with different physicians, I learned about even the existence of sports medicine. I didn't even know what it was a thing. And I did a rotation as a medical student with Kathy Weber, who is my mentor now. She works with me, or she's been ahead of me for a few years. I won't say how many, at Midwest Orthopedics at Rush. And she's the head team physician for the Chicago White Sox and Depaul. And she's worked with the Bulls for forever. And Kathy's just sort of the woman pioneer in sports medicine. And so I had an opportunity to work with her when I was a fourth year medical student, this little dork. It was seeing somebody in that role was like, oh my God, like I could do that. I could do that. I don't know. Or I could do something like that. Like that exists. This is being modeled to me as a thing that is real. You know, it's people that I could relate to. So kind of through that rotation, I realized like, this is what I would like to do. So then it's like, okay, then you have to get into residency. I did a really great residency at Lutheran General Hospital. They're wonderful. They also had really great sports medicine people that taught as well. And then in the last thing I had to be, well, one of the last things I had to be competitive for was my fellowship, which I actually was able to come back to Rush and do it there, which is unbelievable because our fellowship is one of the best in the nation. And so a lot of these things, like I look back and I'm like, very humbled and surprised that I was able to reach all those goals. I just remain extremely grateful through all of it. You make these intentions and you hope that they can come to fruition. And I've been extremely lucky that they have, which is not to discount like, yeah, I worked hard and I did all the things, but it's still surprising to me that I get to have this wonderful job where I'm at now.
I like what you said about talking. Like I always tell people, talk to the people who do the jobs that you want to do. And learn as much as you can. And it's work to do that.
Yep.
But it sounds like that approach worked for you. It sounds like you've been that way since you were in school, really. Yeah. So whatever you wanted to do, whatever level you wanted to go to next, you made sure you were talking to people who were at that level or above. Is that fair to say?
Totally. Absolutely. And I think people appreciate that because people like to tell their story. I mean, exhibit A right here. This is so wonderful.
I say that all the time. I was like, people love to tell their story and it's almost therapeutic for people to share because they don't get to do it all the time.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because they also want to tell you, and like when I'm involved pretty heavily in teaching of our fellows and residents and medical students and stuff. And I always appreciated when people told me the bad stuff too, or the pitfalls to avoid, because not every job is going to be perfect and you're going to have, little idiosyncrasies and things that would be nice to know. Like when you look back at yourself, if you could tell yourself something 10 years before, what would you tell them? And it is nice to be like, okay, well, make sure that your CV has a lot of, research experiences and like, blah, 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 like the stuff that is important, but really like to understand like, hey, sometimes this situation sucks and here's how I navigated it. So make it suck a little bit less. Those little pearls of wisdom and really kind of telling it like it is, I suppose. I still try to carry that forward when I'm working with people that are up and coming as well, because I think it's refreshing to have somebody that's kind of a no bullshit person and to not sugarcoat things. It's really great. I've tried to ask those people's opinions about stuff, Yeah. And so, I think you're right. I think it is really important to pick people that are doing the thing that you think is so great and making sure that you still think it's that great when you really hear the true behind the scenes. And to be honest, the wonderfulness and the greatness outweighed any of the potential frustrations and headaches that you would see.
You said something which I love is that you really want to hear about the bad stuff, the pitfalls, and not even how to avoid them, but just what someone went through. Yeah. So you could either make sure you are aware that those are happening, or you could sidestep them, or you don't feel alone when you make your own mistakes, right? I think that's one of the most important things is that you don't feel alone because we all make mistakes. So tell me this, for women who are working in sports, right? That's the majority of this audience. What pitfalls or what story can you share with us? I love a good story. What story can you share with us about like overcoming a failure? Like almost like what's your favorite failure, if you will?
I think I need to understand, and I keep reminding myself that if someone doesn't like you or that they don't like the situation that they're in with you, they have ample opportunity back out of it. I do think that it is important to understand power dynamics too, because when you are someone's superior, or when you're someone who that person is trying to impress, like, it's not fair for you to be like, well, they can just leave if they want to. It's like, how many situations have you been in that you felt marginalized or browbeaten or felt like you were just steamrolled? And I guess that's sort of one of the pitfalls. And I think that these things only apply in the field of medicine, and it's not. It's like everywhere. It's in business and industry, and especially just what it means to be a woman and a femme presenting person in today's world and trying to become successful, and not being seen as like pushy or shrew-like or naggy or too loud or too much. And the way that I feel the most comfortable nudging myself into the room where it happens is through my defense mechanisms, which are mainly humor and trying to just relate to people. And it really, like, I try to make a joke as much as possible and try to lighten the mood as much as possible. I think that just is a product of my own upbringing of being the youngest of a lot of kids and being the youngest and being a goofball. And I always had a little bit of worry, though, that I was being I guess it's a little bit of imposter syndrome of like, you're being allowed into these rooms just because you're kind of funny and it's nice to have you around. And I think over the past few years, I've come into my own of like worrying that it was just because you're like a fun little goofball that you're like everybody's little kid's sister, and that didn't feel good. That felt yucky to not feel like you were there because you bring value to the organization and to bring value to the conversation. It's like you're there as like the comic relief. And that probably isn't even true, but that was certainly one of my fears of like, you're in here because you're cute and young and a girl and you make jokes, and that was something that I like was struggled with, of feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, or a little bit of like, do I belong here? And then I think I just made the decision of just deciding that I do. Like,
that is great. So you're telling me,
gives a crap that I belong. If I think I belong here, I do. I belong here because I think I do. So here I am. And now I'm just going to share my thoughts and
what I'm hearing you tell me is that all this was internal. So it was almost like what you learned about yourself, you started to feel this imposter syndrome. And then it was really what you realized, it was a story that you were making up about yourself. Yes. This wasn't feedback that anyone was giving you. Nope. This was just you and then you had another shift internally. Yes. And you were like, you know what? I belong here. Like, what am I doing? Like, tell us a little more about that shift. Was it as quickly? And when you tell it in a story, right? It sounds like it was really quick, but like, talk about how long that process was and what you had to do to.
Yeah. I will tell you, there's very little feedback where I am now. And it's very dysregulating. And coming from having so much feedback for so long when you're in training, like when you're a med student, constantly, every month you get evaluated, not only on like your smarts, but it's like, did these doctors that you worked with like you? Like, were you like, you get like written and verbal feedback all the time. And then in residency, like you're constantly meeting with your advisor and like making sure that, that your interpersonal skills are up to snuff. And there's consistent open lines of feedback. Same thing in fellowship. And then all of a sudden you're an attending physician and no one does it anymore, which is weird to me. And maybe it's just my organization, but I think it's like once you get to this certain level, like there's not a lot of people telling you good and bad. And really in the end, I've tried to foster it within my own like small team. So, like me, my athletic trainer, Megan, who I work with, we just hired a new physician assistant, Bree, who's Brad. And I'm trying to like foster that in her too, of like, please let me know if, the way that I'm performing these tasks or asking you to do these things, like, again, like trying to make a safe space for people to say like, this kind of isn't helping me or is adding too much to my plate or whatever. But for the most part, Jahaan, it's really weird to like not have people give you open, honest feedback all the time. And so then my default setting is just getting way too much in my own head about what I'm doing wrong or right. There's no objectivity there. And so I think I wasn't thriving in that space. And so I really had to find a way to reach out to somebody to ask for it, because maybe what I was thinking wasn't true, and I ended up becoming really, really close friends with one of my work partners, Jeremy Allen, who's now my co-host of our podcast, Your Doctor Friends.
Yes.
And we've partnered together with this. We've done a lot of work partnerships together. And I think it's also coming into the idea that we're not just the new kids anymore. Like we're sort of the current into future leadership for different organizations that we're a part of. So long story short, tangential thinking aside, I think for me, it was that I needed to ask somebody, like, is what I'm thinking in my head reality to you? And I trust your opinion, and you can, and I like it. You can be as open, as honest to me. Like, it's okay if it hurts. This is what I need right now. And I would say things to Jeremy, like, does everybody see me as like a joke? And he was like, no, you idiot. Like, why would you think that way? And it's like, well, here's all the things that I've been stewing around in my brain for years. And he was like, no, absolutely no one. And it is so hard when, if you are like a bit of a perfectionist or a really competitive person, to not just convince yourself of those things. So part of it was having a good friend who you trust to give you open, honest feedback and being really okay with what their answer is. So that was one big part of it. But really, other than that, I mean, I still had to decide whether or not I believed him or believed my other friends that I reached out to, that my worrisome mode of thinking was incorrect, because I could have easily just been like, yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And, and just believed my own internal narrative of feeling not good enough. And so, yeah, it wasn't like an overnight thing, Jahaan. But once I shifted my thinking of being like, okay, well, like, just don't upset anybody and let be everybody's best friend and like make sure everybody likes you and everybody's getting along and we're all happy. When I kind of did shift, and that sort of shifted pretty quickly into going back into the arenas, in the professional and the collegiate area, it really felt so different to be like, just don't give a shit and just like be yourself and be the knowledgeable physician who cares about people and who communicates well and who has meaningful ideas about how to make things better, and just go do that. And then I did, and I felt like a completely different person. And it was really wonderful to just drop the baggage. It was that simple in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a lot of self-reflection, a lot of going outside of your own head and asking people who you trust.
Yeah.
Now, what if Dr. Allen gave you negative feedback? Do you think you would have latched onto that more than the compliments that he gave you?
100%. Yes. But I trust him now, and we've had enough conversations that he also knows me well enough to knows how well I can how to receive feedback pretty well. And you also know when people are giving you BS feedback, when it's like they really want to give you a negative piece of information, so they give you a bunch of fluff ahead of time to like make the negative thing not hurt so bad. Yeah, and he doesn't really do that. The sandwich is dumb. Like, we're gonna throw away the bread, so just give me the big stinky meat. I want it. Like, just give it to me now.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely would have really sunk my teeth into the negative part of it. But then in that process of opening up that package and processing that constructive or whatever feedback is the lesson, and how you manage that, it creates growth. And I mean, I would be remiss to say, like, I have a really great therapist too. And I think over the past few years, I've relied on her to sort of help me open these things up as well. And if I didn't, I would be in a totally different place. And these are skills that you just like skills playing a sport, or skills learning, studying for a test, or learning about different ways of giving injections or something. Like, that's just as important of a skill of how to process those feelings that come up when you are given constructive or negative feedback. And I think that they were neglected for a long time because it just wasn't happening. Or maybe I wasn't opening myself up to it. And so it was hard the first few times that or when people would be like, I think, would give constructive feedback. And that's stuff that I would bring to my therapist and be like, all right, how do I not get pissed off? Like my first response is like, whatever, what do they know? And it's like, they know a lot and they're trying to be helpful and you asked for it.
Exactly.
Right. Like, and how do you make that make sense in your own brain? And to be honest, it's really been relying on someone whose whole job it is to help me process that. And that's what I've done with my therapist.
Some of the toughest conversations we have are the ones that we have with ourselves. We can convince ourselves to believe stories that we don't even know are true. What's crazy is we allow that story to take a toll on our confidence. Have you been there before? I know that I have. We get in our heads. We beat ourselves up. Here's some tough love. Nobody's got time for that. We are high achieving women who have big career goals. We don't have time to get in our own way. and I am here to support you with my new one-on-one coaching program, Step Into Your Power and Own Your Career. My clients have told me that when we work together, I've helped them get out of their own way, regain their confidence, learn how to manage their emotion and mindset. They've told me that they've been able to get their voice back and use it with confidence. The most important thing, they've told me that we've identified the obstacle that was getting in their way. If you want to learn more about this program, scroll down in the show notes, click on the link that says Step Into Your Power and Own Your Career. You can set up time to chat with me and we can figure out if this is the right program for what you need. All right, let's get back to the episode. I will tell, and I'll say this to everybody as well. I think you guys have heard me say this before, but I literally got a therapist for work. Like It wasn't a business therapist because I didn't know that existed at the time, right? But like my anxiety is like through the roof, always in my own head. And so I was like, I need to talk this out. And sometimes I would say things out loud to her and I'm like, wait, what? Like as soon as it came out of my mouth and I gave it life, I was like, this is not actually, I take that back. Let's talk about something else. Like sometimes I would just like literally coach myself in the sessions. You just need someone to talk to that has nothing to do with the sports world, nothing to do with the medicine world. Like just somebody who just, that is their job to listen to you and process.
It's great sometimes when they just let you sit in it. Like, I feel like, like when people that love you and that are close to you, like your friends and your family and even coworkers, like when something comes out of your mouth that is something that you feel very vulnerable about. And usually people's knee-jerk reactions to be like, oh my God, no, Jahaan, why would you think that? Absolutely not. You're the most perfectest thing that ever existed. And because they love you and they want you to be happy, but that's not probably the constructive thing that you need to hear. I love when my therapist just like doesn't say anything. She just lets me sit in that thought and process it myself. You know, it's the same way you would if you were parenting. You'd be like, okay, just play that out a little bit more and see how that goes, you know, as opposed to like, no, you're the most beautiful angel baby creature. Yeah.
And like quick knee-jerk reaction. And sometimes you don't want that.
No.
You're like, no, but like, this is not helping me. Like, I just need, And
then you're like, okay, I'm going to go ask somebody else until I get the answer that I want.
Yes.
And maybe the answer that you really want, an answer that you need is no answer, because it's your opportunity to process through that sort of negative self-talk. And I agree with you. And I almost get frustrated because I feel like logically I'm smarter than my emotions, but they still win a lot. It's like, why am I upset right now? Like if I look at, if I were to write this down objectively, there's nothing to be upset about, but it doesn't matter. I'm still feeling upset. So you can just decide to feel that feeling and process it and go through it and then say thank you to that feeling and then move on, you know, because I feel like for a long part of my life, I didn't do that. And it was just sort of like, this feels bad. Just smush it down, do more work, be more productive, try to please more people, try to get more positivity from people. It's really come to, I'm not responsible for other people's happiness and other people aren't responsible for mine. And I can't believe it took me 38 years to figure that out, but I'm sure it'll probably take another 38 years for me to believe it. So
that is exactly right. I am in that same boat. And that quote that you just said, I mean, is dead on. Like, was it yesterday or 2 nights ago? I was at a WISE mentoring, like a speed mentoring event. And at the end, they asked all the mentors to give advice. And I was like, okay, how many people in the room are people pleasers? And like people slowly raised their hands and admitted it. I was like, you have to let that go. Like, that's the one thing I wish someone told me when I was younger and junior in my career, like the people pleasing. And it's hard once you become aware of it though, it's easier to say but you can manage it. Like you can realize what you're doing and manage it and not let it impact you as much as it did in the beginning.
The other side of people pleasing is that the resentment that I would get when people that were not people pleasers, that didn't give a crap and just did what they wanted to do, succeeded. And you were like, what the hell? That guy's a jerk. And everybody wants to throw money at him. That's crap, you know, like, and it would be so hard to be like, I check the temperature of the room every time I walk in and I make sure everybody's having a great time. And I think so hard about 5 steps ahead of whether or not this person's going to be a little upset with me. And that person didn't have half of a second of thinking of that. And they're doing extremely well. And the resentment that would build. And it's like, that resentment is not harming that person that's successful at all. It's only harming me. And deciding to say, okay, well, me being annoyed that that person isn't trying hard enough, isn't toiling as much as I am to be liked, was so frustrating. And then I realized that it's just me spinning my wheels and wasting my time. And again, like, it's one of those things that it's so hard that you can't just read it, or you can't just be told it necessarily, from a trusted friend. You just kind of have to live it and learn it, and then you understand how it is. And that's the part that really, I wish I just had, what's the cheat codes to self-improvement?
Seriously. Yeah, seriously. And it's funny because people are listening right now going, yes, you're right. Okay, I'm going to go change this.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy.
No,
right?
it's
like
not.
that's literally why I do the work that I do. Cause it's like, okay, I'm going to give you as much free like content and advice that I can give you. And if you don't need us, like you don't need me, great. But like a lot of us, I know I did, like I needed more support because I'd walk away and I'd feel like a little pep in my step from listening to a podcast. And I'm like, wait, how did you make this a reality? That's where the work begins. That's the hard part. And what you just said about the resentment is 100% true. And I think the most important thing we can do is when we feel that resentment is to check in with ourselves and be like, okay, like, why am I feeling this way? Like, what's Brene Brown always says, like, what's the insecurity I'm feeling? Yeah. This is more, you got to own your part. And that's so, I would say freeing in a way, but like, it just allows you to grow when you do that.
I read somewhere, somebody said, I forget where it was, but that resentment happens when you overstep your own boundaries. And I'd never looked at it that way. Cause for me, it was like, I'm resentful of you because of what you're doing. And it's like, no, it's probably because you're pissed at yourself that you overstepped your boundary, of protecting yourself or not people pleasing, or to gain the acceptance of that person or that society or that situation. So that resentment has nothing to do with that person. It has everything to do with you being annoyed with yourself at not adhering to your values. And it's absolutely true. And then when you think about that, we're like, all right, yeah, I know. That eating Humboldt pie a little bit, you feel crappy for a second. And then you say, all right, well, I'm going to move on. And the other thing that I learned too, that I hold on to, is not ruminating on when you've made a mistake or done something or said something that was boneheaded or silly or like, oh, I wish I could take that back. Is like, you have a little conference with yourself and you say, okay, that email that you sent when you said this thing that was kind of dumb or maybe a little rude or a little like just not in line with your values or whatever, that thing that you did, what did you do to remedy it? You went back and you talked to that person and you squashed the beef. Everything was fine. And you moved on. And so like, you dealt with the situation. So you thinking about it 3 weeks later and ruminating of like, oh my God, I bet they're still mad at me. Or like, how stupid of you to say that, like, goodness, like just ruminating on that negative experience or that mistake that you made. It's like, you have to go back to be like, nope, we talked about this. We had a conference about this. We talked about it and we took care of it. So it's over. And then it really has been like a little, like, if you're going to talk about life hacks, that's one I've used. It's like, nope, we talked about that. That's over. We already remedied that situation. So let's move on. And it's like, thanks, internal HR manager in my brain. Like, it's so true. Cause you would do that if you had an external conversation about a thing that you were embarrassed about or something. But because I feel like I can get very bogged down in old embarrassments. And I don't know why. It's a weird reptilian brain thing that I want to go away.
Oh gosh. And they come up at the oddest times, right? Like trying to go to sleep. Yeah. And then like you go down this path and you're like, wait, this happened like 10 years ago. Why did this just pop in my head? I'm fine.
Let me overthink this for 3 hours and feel like crap. I know. Yes. And it's hard not to get mad at yourself, to just be like, I know you're smarter than this. There's no point in this, but it's the insecurities, and it's okay to play those things out. That's what therapy, and that's what even like conversations like this are for. I get the most out of understanding and relating to other people, that we have so many shared experiences that it's so nice to not feel like you're the only one who's having these ridiculous thoughts in your head and these sometimes negative coping mechanisms that are just part of being human. And I think as women, we tend to be more open about talking about them. And I think that's what makes give us the potential to be really great leaders. Is I think it's nice to know that you're not alone in your thought processes that may not be all that helpful.
Yeah. And on the flip side too, it's nice knowing you're not alone with people who are, in successful positions and
Yeah.
leadership positions
Right.
who are climbing their way up, right? Like it's just, and I say that from my own experiences with being the people pleaser.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to see women who are not people pleasers and are just unapologetic. I know that word gets overused, but unapologetic about their success.
Yep. And I'm not quite there yet, but I like to surround myself or I gravitate towards people that are that way and then just try to like learn by osmosis.
Yes.
Let it rub off on me because it's positive behavioral modeling and it doesn't need to be scary and it doesn't need to be, I think that's sort of the role that I've morphed into in my feeling of one being like afraid that I'm just like the goofball that it's fun to be around. And it's more, you can be goofy and you can retain the things that keep your soul or keep your values. Like, I don't think that I'm some sort of crazy, radically different person, but I, like in my practice, even I don't look the exact same as everybody else. And I have different interests that I don't hide. I feel it's so weird to talk about. It's like, I like punk rock and I have tattoos and like, oh, there's like things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but like
they matter.
Yeah, but like I'm a little bit outward in my appearance about what some of my values are, if that makes any sense. And I used to in the past be very guarded with showing people even just like social justice things that I'm into and being a little more open on social media to a degree in the professional world of showing the stuff that matters to me and the type of language that I use. And again, I think a lot of it is just positive behavioral modeling of just showing that you can ascribe to different backgrounds and thought processes and show your values. And it can be unscary, to people if you just show them like, yeah, but I'm also just like your buddy. And I'm not totally understanding what I'm trying to get at there, but it's just sort of, I always was afraid that I was going to like lose my soul in the machine of like being in this big orthopedic practice. And I always was worried that like becoming more and more successful means you have to, it kind of makes me think about selling out and like being a kid of the 90s and being into like alternative and punk rock music and stuff. Selling out is like the worst possible thing you ever could have done. Like when I was a kid, it was like, man, you can never sell out. Like that's the worst. And really it just means like losing your core values is really what it comes down to. And in my mind, it was like, yeah, well, if you get like rich and powerful, then you definitely have sold out, and it's like, well, to a degree, the answer is yes.
What is this voice?
You can, I don't know. This is like, I don't know what this voice is stupid. It's like real. I feel like it's like West Coast skater punk, which is not even what I was into at all. I know, but it's sort of like, it just reminds me of, like being a sellout was the worst thing you could think of. But I think what I'm tapping into is that sort of like soulless trying to fill the empty void with more and more stuff and more money and more accolades and more titles. Are you going to get into that just sort of nothing matters anymore because you have everything? And that was worrisome. And I realized I'm never going to get there. Like, one, because it's not within my values, and two, because it just doesn't appeal to me. But I don't know. That was always my biggest concern is like, you can't sell out, but that doesn't mean that you can't be successful either, Yeah.
So it sounds like to me, like you were worried about something that hadn't even happened yet.
Oh, I do that all the time. That's like, I'm like the best at that.
Or close to happening.
Yeah.
Was this stopping you from being successful in a way when you were thinking about what you didn't want to be?
Yep. I think that it was totally a self-sabotage way of thinking because it's like, well, I don't want to be that successful. It's a fear of failure manifested. It's like, well, no, I don't even want to do that anyway. And it's like, no, you do. Yeah, you just are scared that you're going to fail, So it's like, so you build up this level of success that seems like you're a bad person now, and it's like, no, you'll never get there because, hopefully you'll never get there because you surround yourself with really good people that are grounding, like my friends and my husband, Adam, have very similar values that I do and are people that I trust to call me out on my BS if I'm ever in my own head too much. And like, I just don't think I would ever get to a place that I would lose my soul and lose my sense of self. I understand that it's a slightly valid worry, but I also wonder if it is a form of self-sabotage. To be like, well, then, it's fine if you don't even try. You don't have to try because you might fail. So, but but it's okay because you didn't want that thing anyway. And it's like, yeah, you do. You want it.
Yeah.
But it's also like the fear of the more success you get, the more that you open yourself up to criticism. And that's something that even with starting the podcast with Jeremy, of like putting yourself out there means that you're also putting yourself out there for people's opinions of you. And it's been great so far, but I'm also like constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop and how I'm going to respond to people's negative feedback. And determining how much I let that matter to me. And I think, I don't know, I'm sure you can relate, Jahaan, of one of my best friends. She's amazing. She's a huge, it kind of like happened organically in a span of a few weeks, became like this major TikTok star. And she talks about social justice issues, about something called the fair play method, which is like figuring out sort of domestic labor at home and organizing domestic tasks between different partners at home and making sure we don't build resentment. And anyway, she's amazing. And we had her on the podcast. Her name's Laura Danger, and she's unreal. And I was like, Laura, like, how do you manage being on TikTok and like all of the, sometimes she'll have a video that she posts that has 8 million views and have 30,000 comments. And it's like, how do you manage like all of the trolls? And she's like, it doesn't matter. You just have to stay true to what your values are and what was the message that you were trying to say. And if those people don't get it, I don't care. And it's hard to be like, but I care. It's so hard not to have fragile feelings, So I don't know. Yeah. I give people a lot of credit who put themselves out there and are, again, like, I think you're right, unapologetic about their content and their values because they know it aligns with what they care about. So it still hurts though when someone's a jerk to you.
Yes. And it's okay that it hurts. And it's okay that there's other people it rolls off their back, but you have to just sit with your feelings for a minute.
Yeah.
Don't set up camp there and live there.
Yeah.
Right. You feel it and then you have to move on, which is practice. It takes a lot of practice to do that. I'm going to link to Laura Danger in the show notes so people can check her out. And also I want to link to your podcast, Dr. Friends.
Yeah.
Tell us, and we're running short on time, but tell us in like a couple of minutes what that podcast is about.
So your Dr. Friends, the idea was that it's very difficult to find salient, easy to digest, valid, evidence-based medical information online sometimes. And it's certainly hard. There's many barriers in getting that information from your own physician sometimes, like you have to have insurance and then you have to make an appointment and then you have to have the right questions and make sure that you have enough time to get those questions answered. And sometimes you just have a concern that's like, what's this weird thing on my leg? Or like, I just got an x-ray. My doctor just called me and said my chest x-ray looks abnormal, or like just those things that come up that you wish if you had a doctor friend that you would text them. And Jeremy, my co-host partner, and I get these things all the time from our friends and families of like, hey, Julie, my kid's having an ear thing. What do you think about this or whatever? And it is so nice to have something you can just bounce some concern off of. So Jeremy and I were talking about that a lot at work. And we were also fielding a lot of the same questions when we would see patients in the office especially about like musculoskeletal things, about like, can stem cells cure my arthritis? And is this treatment good for that thing or whatever? There's things like, oh, by the way, while I have you here, questions. And so we thought it'd be nice to just take those questions, either taking them directly from our listeners via, like, we have an email, we have a doctor hotline that you could leave a message if you wanted to, or just the questions that we field a million times and answer those questions. And if we aren't the best experts about it, like we had some men's health and erectile dysfunction questions, or we had contraceptive questions, or we had, a bunch of pelvic floor health things that aren't really my area of expertise, then we find people that are experts. So we've had different physicians, we've had different physical therapists and other people that are experts in those fields, and they answer the questions for us. And they're usually really funny and really normal and laid back people who have wonderful anecdotes and sort of explain the answers to these questions and sort of just give salient information. And they really love showing the receipts and saying like, this is why the information that is out there is probably crap. And it's probably just trying to sell you something. And here's what the academies and organizations that have poured through this information for years and looked at the research, why these are the guidelines and the recommendations. And there you go, And so it's just a way to try to put a little bit more good and more positivity and good, solid, non-BS information out there, because there's so much of the opposite out there. So Jeremy and I really wanted an opportunity to kind of help people increase their own healthcare literacy and agency and advocate for themselves by passively listening to something that hopefully is kind of fun and funny and goofy too. So,
all right. I will definitely link to that. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Yes, I am.
I feel like you're going to be really good about this. Okay.
I don't know.
Number one, there's 12 questions, super easy. First one, what is your favorite sports moment?
Mark Burley's perfect game.
What is something people always get wrong about you?
I don't know if they always do, but I guess I'm worried that my sense of humor is a little skewed. And so hopefully they don't take it as me being terribly uncouth or I swear too much. So I'm really a good person. I just have a little bit of gallows humor sometimes too.
What is one food you wouldn't want to give up?
I eat rice pudding before I go to sleep when I watch my nighttime go to bed shows. And I eat rice pudding. I don't know why I love it. It's so comforting. I call it my nightcap. So
your nightcap with your night shows.
It's ridiculous. I know. It's usually like some sort of, Great British Bake Off or something, very visual Xanax-y.
Are you a morning or a night person?
Oh, nighttime for sure. 100%.
Favorite holiday?
Halloween, spooky season, baby.
I think I know the answer to this. Dog or cat person?
I'm a cat person. I love dogs. I just don't have the bandwidth or time at home to take care of them. But I have 5 cats. There's only one that was.
You have 5 cats?
I know, Jahaan. I know. I blame my husband though too. We kept finding these little critters, and then we'd take them in, and then the rescue organizations would then call us and be like, "Hey guys." So we have 5. We have a basketball team of cats.
Wow, I'm impressed. I only saw 1 this entire time.
It's nap time right now.
Oh, it's nap time. My goodness. What product would you seriously stockpile if you found out they weren't going to sell it anymore?
I really like the Arm & Hammer toothpaste that I've been using for the past 20 years. It's really good. It's the only thing that makes my mouth feel really clean. I'm super self-conscious. My dad had all of his teeth pulled out of his head when he was like 18 years old. So I feel like I'm worried that I know he grew up in like rural Ohio. So I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, I'm always worried that I try to take really meticulous care of my teeth, but I really love the Arm & Hammer toothpaste that we use. I don't know. This is hard, man.
No one has ever said that. That is a toothpaste. That is incredible.
It's really good toothpaste. I don't know. You ever like been to someone else's house and you stayed over and you used their toothpaste? You're like, this tastes different. I don't like it.
Yeah. No.
I don't want.
I know that. I hate that feeling. Oh, gross. No,
I know. Like when they have kids. Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What is your favorite
app? Oh, probably TikTok now. I love it. I got into it because of Laura, and now I'm addicted, and it's wonderful. And it's kind of become my little echo chamber, but it's a nice little place to settle for, half an hour every night.
I won't do it. I downloaded it and then I deleted it.
Yeah, you're probably smart. That's probably a smart move. But she helped me curate it, so it's a bunch of people that I value their opinions about stuff, and so and then a bunch of like stupid cat things too. So it's fine.
Who is your biggest inspiration in life?
My mother-in-law, Linda. She is amazing. My husband's mom, Linda, I'll be really brief. She's awesome. She's a teacher for years and years. We all got sick with COVID as a family in March of 2020, right at the beginning, right? Or like when shutdown happened. Yeah. And Linda got really, 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 really sick. She was on the ventilator in the hospital in the ICU for like 6 weeks. It was really awful. We didn't think she was going to make it. And she did. She made it through. And then as soon as she got home a few months later, because she had to go to like inpatient rehab because she was so sick, then she was diagnosed with lung cancer, which was insane. But because they were able to catch it so early, because they had all these scans from when she had COVID, they were able to resect the cancer and it hadn't spread anywhere. And she's done amazing. And I just think she's wonderfully inspirational. Actually, Rush Stories is doing a big story on her because of her story is unbelievable. But Linda has been a huge inspiration for me, and really over the pandemic in the past couple of years has been like a big anchor. So yeah, Linda Bruene.
Wow,
unreal.
Sorry, that story just like whoo.
Yeah, it's a lot, and she did amazing, and I'm incredibly inspired by everything she does.
Okay. I don't even know how to go on from that. But as a child, what did you want to become when you grew up?
Oh, like a movie star or something stupid like that. I wanted attention constantly. I wanted, and now it's like, I want everyone to look at me, but no one to look at me at the same time. Like, yes. Like this. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I wanted to be some sort of like famous young actor. I don't know. That was like in the 90s when everybody was like, there was a bunch of like young child actors. And I was like, I could be that too. I'm also, it's like, no, you're not. You're fine. You're good where you are.
Go be a doctor. All right. Last one. Finish the sentence. All right. Ready? Finish the sentence. The future of women working in sports is
already happening. I think we're insidiously, I'm calling it insidious positivity. I think that for so long there's been kind of baked in yuckiness in a lot of industry and through sports, and just sort of, I guess not yuckiness, but non-sustainability, and I think women in particular are really forward thinking and sustainable thinkers and understand the role of our emotions and how we can regulate them and use them to bring us all together as opposed to driving us all apart. And I think we're already doing that. And I think we just need to continue to sort of bake in the positivity so that it doesn't feel like it's being piled on. It's just part of the culture. And I think we're continuing to slowly change it from within. And I have all the faith in the world that we will continue to do so. And I think that's the way we have to do it. And I'm already very encouraged and inspired, and we just have to keep moving forward.
Love it. That was a great way to end. Julie, this has been a fantastic conversation. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
I'm on Instagram at Julia Breuene, Bruene, MD. That's where I post a fair amount of stuff there, so you can connect with me there. If you want to make an appointment with me, you can find me through Rush. I respond to DMs and stuff on Insta.
All right, perfect. Julie, thank you so much for spending time with us. This was fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like I owe you money for the therapy that you just offered for me. So, Jahaan, I'll think of a good way to repay you.
Didn't Dr. B have you laughing? In between the laughter, I loved digging into some of the mindset challenges that she has dealt with. My favorite, well, I know it's weird to have a favorite mindset issue, especially about somebody else. Let's just say the one that stood out the most was the story she made up about her colleagues and how they viewed her. How many of you have made up a story in your head and let it spiral so much that you believed it to be true? I'm raising my hand right now. We've all been there. You are not alone. It's why you have to make sure you do as Dr. B said and surround yourself with people who will call you on your bullshit. Until next week, my friends. For now, make sure to stay in touch by following me at Jahaan Blake on both Instagram and LinkedIn. Talk soon.